Hello and welcome to Morris Park. And welcome again to Euphorbia 101. Today on Euphorbia 101, Morris Park in the Ozarks, I want to just discuss euphorbias in general and what makes a euphorbia a euphorbia. Most people, when they see my euphorbias, they say, hey, that's a pretty cool cactus. Or you'll see plants like this for sale as coral cactus. Well, these are not cactus. And I tell people that, and they look at me in kind of a strange glare and like, huh? They look like a cactus to me. They got the thick stems. They have spines. Why aren't they a cactus? Well, this is something called convergence. Convergence, what it means is that similar things that grow in similar areas, and this is plants and animals both, take on similar forms. So the cactus in Mexico or Arizona may look spiny and all, and have a thick body, such as this saguaro. This is a saguaro cactus, a young one, but it is a saguaro. And you see the spines, you see the thick body, and you would say it looks kind of like this. It's got a thick body, it's got spines, it's got to be a cactus. Well, not true. The Euphorbiaceae is a huge family, and it's a vast family. This family encompasses many genuses, just like cacti do, such as, Echinopsis and Mammillarias and Carnegie gigantea, the saguaro I just showed you. All cactus and different genuses in this cactus. Now in the Euphorbiaceae, as I say, there are many genuses. Plants like crotons, the houseplant croton that you know, monodeniums, synodeniums, and this is a monodenium right here, Monodenium heteropodium, and it's in the Euphorbiaceae also. I've had some flowers open right now. I'd show you exactly what the flowers look like, but they're slightly different than your average euphorbia flower. But this is a monodenium, and it's not. It is in a separate genus other than Euphorbia, the genus Euphorbia, but it is in the Euphorbiaceae. Now, getting back to what I was saying about convergence, is that these euphorbias evolved in similar areas, just like our cactus did in our desert southwest and like South America and Mexico and so forth. These being from like South Africa, Southern Asia like India, Pakistan, and so forth. These are desert regions that mirror our own desert regions. And that's why these plants evolved in the ways that they did. Now the actual genus Euphorbia, which you're looking at right here, is encompassing all these succulent plants. And so, people are probably going to ask, so these are all succulents, these euphorbias are all succulents. Well, not quite. This is a Euphorbia millii from Madagascar. This is actually a hybrid. I think it's hybridized with Lofogana from Madagascar. And you see it's kind of a leafy plant. It does have succulent stems, and it can withstand times of drought, and does have an ability to go through drought times by losing those leaves. This also is another Madagascan species, Euphorbia francoisii. And it has leaves also, but they're much thicker, much more succulent leaves. And it grows a little bit different. But then we go over here to Dicarii spirosticea. Now these things are getting to look more different and more different all the time. See here? And you see the little flowers on the spirosticea have the cyathial bracts around them, much like this one and this one. It seems to be a characteristic of a lot of Madagascan euphorbias, not all, but a lot of them. And some in Africa do this too. But these are just so different plants. The horridus, say, different from a Lactea cristata, and I'll show you the Lactea here. And this is the Lactea normal stem form, but the variegated type, but basically the normal type of what I just showed you of the Lactea crests. But they grow like this, or like the king, a massive tree. And these euphorbias can grow to huge trees. Euphorbia ingens being the largest. And if you ever look this up on the computer, you'll see these massive trees outweigh and outgrow saguaro cacti and the largest cacti there are. But quite different. And I'm going to show you something else that's even more different. Now this is Euphorbia leucanura, and it is also a Madagascan species. The flowers are a bit different. Now what you're seeing there, the little flowers with the pistils have 3 ends on them. There's a female, and the ones down below here, the fuzzier looking one, it's kind of an old one, is a male. And they both have male and female flowers on this one. But the flowers are separate flowers. And here what's strange about euphorbias also is that their flowers range so much. You can have some euphorbias being a male or a female plant, and so you need 2 plants to have seeds, a male and a female. Or you can have a plant that has female flowers and male flowers on it separately, but on the same plant. Or solely female flowers like this horrida. This horrida is a female plant. It does not produce its own seed through male flowers it has, or through male flowers that are in the same flower. Same here with this Francoisii. This is a male plant. You won't see the stigma sticking up in the middle with the 3 ends, just the pollen stamens. And there's actually, believe it or not, there's actually 5 flowers to each head in there. Very unusual. I'll show you something else. This euphorbia is Opuntoides. And Opuntoides actually produces a head that's a lot different. Cyathea are a lot different on this, the flowers, by producing female flowers on either side of a male flower. See that? Looks like a little candlestick there. The center one is a male flower. The 2 on either side are female flowers. So there's another different variation. And this is what the male flowers actually look like on this plant. If you can see them, I can't really get a good focus, but you see them. That's the solid male flowers. Very unusual. And then you see the buds for the female flowers coming up on either side. So that's quite a bit different. And then some of these flowers, I don't think I have any in bloom right now, will be the male flowers, but have a female stigma sticking right up through the center of them. And I don't have any in bloom like that right now, so I can't show you those. But anyway, I'll show you something else more amazing. Now this is another plant in the Euphorbiaceae, but is not a euphorbia. This is a jatropha. And this one's from Mexico. A lot of the ones euphorbias we're familiar with coming from Africa and so forth, but this is a Mexican euphorbia, and euphorbias are worldwide. They grow everywhere. I think except for the Arctic regions and so forth, euphorbias are pretty much everywhere. Even here in the United States, farmers battle with what they call spurge. And they spend a whole bunch of money on trying to get rid of this stuff. And so we have several euphorbias that grow right here in Missouri, but they're annuals. Now, here's one kind of close up. I kind of left this one growing in with these cactus. It's basically a weed. This is Euphorbia maculata, or maculata, excuse me. I kind of got that wrong. I'm going to show you a good sized patch of that in here in just a second. But I wanted to show you this. And looking at this plant, and I don't know if I can get even close enough to see this. See if I can get this. You can see a little 3-sided seed pod right there. Kind of popped out there. Anyhow, characteristic of euphorbias. I'll show you another one. This is another euphorbia. The exact species escapes me right now. But this is one that grows here in Missouri. It's just a common weed, basically. It's kind of coming up next to one of our yuccas. But it hasn't started to flower yet. But this is very common here. It grows all over the place. And it looks kind of like a poinsettia, actually. And I'm going to show you one here in just a second that even looks more like a poinsettia, and they actually call it the Missouri poinsettia. But as you see, I'll pick a leaf off of this. There's that telltale sap. All euphorbias have this telltale sap. All the ones in the genus Euphorbia have this. We're going to have to wash our hands after handling this because all euphorbias are toxic in some way. But this is an herbaceous annual. It's not a perennial. It's not cactiform like a lot of the ones we know. And it's not succulent like a lot of the ones we know. Very, very different. Now I'll show you a really nice actually plant of Euphorbia davidii, and a really nice one of maculata, if you want to call them nice, because they're actually both considered weeds. Here we go. Now here are some really good examples of Missouri's native euphorbias. This is Euphorbia davidii. It's an annual euphorbia. You can see the little seed pods there, little three-sided seed pods that all euphorbias get. An identifying thing with euphorbias. And of course, the white sap. And you can see there. See that? Right there. White sap, which is toxic like most euphorbias. This is Euphorbia maculata. Another one of our native euphorbias, also termed as spurge. And farmers usually hate this stuff and spend a lot of money trying to get rid of it. But it just goes to show you how different these plants can be. Now here's one you'll recognize. This is a euphorbia also, and you may not have thought of it in the past. This is Euphorbia pulcherrima. This is the Christmas poinsettia. These plants also come from Mexico, like the jatropha does. This is a euphorbia. This is in the genus Euphorbia, just like the cactiform ones are. And this just shows, along with the little annual weeds, the poinsettias, and all, just how vast and different this family is. This plant family is so different. And it is actually more vast and more different than the cactaceae, because pretty much all cactus are succulents, even though all succulents are not cacti. But the Euphorbiaceae, it's not so. They can be all forms. All forms. They can be leafy and herbaceous like the poinsettia here, and they actually grow into a perennial sub-tree or shrub, if you want to call it. I've seen them get over 8 feet tall in California. Or our euphorbias can be succulent, such as this Euphorbia turricale. And that's what's even stranger. I mean, look at the form on this one. Very different. They call this pencil tree. Sometimes sticks of fire because of the red that appears on this plant. I got this plant from Katie's Creations last year. She was nice enough to gift me this plant. But it's starting to grow pretty good now. But very different. No spines. It's not really cactiform. Not leafy like the poinsettia. Just different. And here's another form. They call these the Medusa heads, or the Medusoid euphorbias. You see all the little arms radiating out from that single stem. This is Euphorbia gorgonus. It's been in bloom for a little bit. It's had 2 blooming cycles so far. But see, much different than the kind of cactiform. But in euphorbias, they can be rounded, columnar, leafy, tree-like, like this one. They can be a succulent type, looking much like a cactus in the dry season, but then having leaves on top. Even though they're a succulent, but having the leaves on top. And these leaves aren't succulent leaves. They shed these leaves toward the winter. When they start to dry out for the winter, they just lose those leaves. Funny thing about this euphorbia is it likes to bloom right as it goes to sleep. So when it loses the leaves, that's when it starts to bloom. Very curious plant. The other medusoid types, and I usually don't call these medusoids because the fact that, like the Gorgonus and so forth, and Flanaganii and some of them, look like snakes coming from the main head. These are a little different, having spiny branches. And usually I call these the dwarf paired spine euphorbias. There's a persistence back there. It's much the same. This was my Enigma hybrid. This was done by pollinators in my greenhouse. I only got one, so it's probably one of the most rare plants in the world of hybrids, because there's only one. It starts out flat branches, ends up with these four-angled, more rounded branches. Very unusual. Hybridized with Evansii, the stellata with Evansii. That's how this happened. But another different form. Well, they can clump together like that. There's some columnar forms. Or thorny as all get out. Look at that. Almost an impenetrable shrub, so to speak. And this is one of the ones that grows from a main stem too. And with all these euphorbias, there's different ways to propagate them too. And that's something I'll go into later on, or you can see my video propagating by the two-step method. But I'll talk about propagation in Euphorbia 101 later, and give you an idea on how to propagate almost all your euphorbias. This is the Euphorbia millii, the species type. See, it's got the characteristic red flowers. They're not too showy or flashy, but it makes like a briar. It looks much like a briar. And see, there's a blackberry behind it growing there. Well, it's very similar in that way. Thorny stems and leaves. Now this one you can see is a tree, and that's just because I trained it that way. Unless you train it that way, it'll be a rambling briar-like plant. They kind of have no rhyme or reason on which way they go. So I trained it up into a tree. That way I can keep it with less space, and it looks great. And this is the Euphorbia Evansii tree. I was just showing you my Enigma. And this is the father of that tree, of that plant, excuse me. See, different again. Everything is just so different on these plants. Just endless. And here again, we're changing up again. And this is kind of a dwarf variation of the milli complex. This is Euphorbia milli var imperator. And when I first bought this many years ago, 37 years ago, 38 years ago actually, all it had was Euphorbia milli var nova. It was a newer variety. See the tiny flowers? They're just exactly like the big ones, just in miniature. The leaves are more thick and more succulent, and the thorns are tinier, but it's really that kind of briar look on the inside. It just doesn't ramble as much, and it's more compact. But there again, another difference. Some of these euphorbias do kind of like some of the cactus do too, and this, there again, is another case of convergence. If the sun's real bright, and they need a little protection from that super bright sun, they'll cover themselves in this white coating like this polygona. And for those of you who are familiar with the genus Copaipoas, they do the same thing, basically. They cover themselves with this white waxy coating. Also, Eublemania pectinifera, to be exact, also has a white silvery coating if it's not grafted. If you have a grafted one, then it's probably dark like mine is. This one's grafted, so it doesn't produce a silvery coating that's usually on there. But they need that silvery coating in nature, on their own roots of course, to protect themselves from the sun. Also, much like these astrophytums, doing the same thing, creating that coating to protect themselves from extra bright sunlight. This euphorbia here. Now this euphorbia is kind of actually an unknown euphorbia. I've known about it a long time. It's been in cultivation a long time, but it's sold as Euphorbia lauricata. The Euphorbia Journal says not so. And the Euphorbia Journal says this plant is somehow lost in everything, being sold as lauricata. And it's actually not. But anyhow, besides that, this is another columnar type of plant, and it's actually grown to like a shrub. Of these long stems, and then blooming up top, and when these flower peduncles here, stems die off, they kind of make spines, like down here. See that? Little spines? Now, Euphorbia loricata does do that in nature, but Euphorbia loricata also requires two plants, a male and a female, to get seed. This one does not. This one has both sexes on the same plant. And you can see there's a seed pod right there of it. There you go. Just the male parts seem to be blooming right at the moment. I'd like to show you one that has a female in it, but they aren't out right at the moment. But anyhow, another different Euphorbia. I'll show you this one. Now this one's actually a hybrid between two Euphorbias. This is a hybrid between a Horrida and a Polygona. I showed you the Polygona a minute ago with the white coating. And this one has a little bit thinner white coating. Whoops. Get down here. A little thinner white coating. Beautiful plant though. But there's just so much different variation in these Euphorbias. Now these are Euphorbia seed pods, and these are off of a Euphorbia aphylla. As you can see, they're a 3-part seed pod. They, when they're mature, Euphorbia seeds, basically what they do is they split apart. These 3 sections here will split apart. And actually you can hear them when they split. They make a loud crack sound, and you can hear the seeds actually going across the greenhouse sounding like sand being thrown. But there's only 1 seed per side. So in each one of these little lobes here, there's 1 seed. And that's kind of the difference between cactus and euphorbias also, is the number of seeds they produce. Cactus produce a number of seeds in their fruit and so forth. You know, depending on the species, there can be hundreds and hundreds of them. But euphorbias, it's only 3 per pod, and that's with any species, whether it's the weeds growing in your driveway or it's the big cactiform ones, and whether they're the size of your thumb or they're almost, you know, so tiny they're like a pinhead. But they all do this. They're all very similar. That's how you can tell a euphorbia also, and that's one of the characteristics. And this is the reason I love them so much. I mean, just sitting next to each other, see the variation? There's one. There's ruginosa. There, macalensis. Brevitorta. This is a Polygona. Just so different. And this is why I really like them. There's just so much variation of plant. Now, they don't have the beautiful flowers that cacti do, but some of their flowers are kind of interesting. Cacti having more of the petaled flowers with the male stamens and the female stigma in the center. Bisexual flowers that produce either their own seed. Well, some don't. Some are kind of self-sterile, but they have both parts. They have the male and female parts. Anyhow, this is Clyde Morris from Morris Park. I hope I've explained a little bit of this in kind of layman's terms. It could get a lot more complicated. A lot of euphorbias are broken down into groups as to their forms, and plants that have similar forms are broken into subgroups and so forth, but this gets really complicated. And if you really want to know about all this in real detail, go look at the Euphorbia journals. There's 10 volumes of these books. They're fantastic books. I recommend them highly. If you can find them, please read them. I get all my information from them. I've learned so much from these books on my euphorbias and the groups and everything else. But it gets very technical, and it'd take probably hours to explain everything. And in another video, I will explain on propagating a lot of these euphorbias, and some of them are very different in how they have to be propagated. Of course, all of them go from seed, but when it comes to cuttings, things might change up. Anyway, this is Clyde Morris from Morris Park, Euphorbia 101, and what is a euphorbia? It's definitely not a cactus. Take care, guys.